good. If you have a mom that's ever sacrificed for you, a grandma who's ever done something for you above and beyond, a mentor in your life who's ever been amazing speaking into your life, would you stand up and let's give all the moms a round of applause, a standing ovation today. There's virtually no way to just say thank you enough, right? You may be seated. You may be seated. We're so glad that you came today to honor moms with us at Genesis Metro Church, maybe to worship some with us today. It's always good to be here, so thank you for coming. Before we get started, I just want to take a moment. I know my mom is going to watch this later. Take a moment to indulge me to say, I texted her this morning and said, there's no way to put into words to say thank you for shaping me, for praying over me, for disciplining me and teaching me what boundaries and authority and who God was and how to love people. So, Mom, I love you. Thank you for all that you've done. There's just no way to say thank you enough. Today, Pastor Tim has asked me to come and speak on Mother's Day. As always, every year I do this, so thank you. I'm his wife, Pastor Carrie. If you're here and you're new and you're like, who are you? Where's the pastor? He's taken the Sunday off, so it's good to be here as always. I'm always grateful for the opportunity. Last week, we were here in Uprising Men's Conference had just returned, the Brotherhood. That was amazing to hear about last week, wasn't it, church? It was so awesome. I hope that you and your own homes were talking about that all week. I know that we were. And as I sat and I listened to them share, Tim asked a couple of the young guys to share what had happened in their experiences. Derek Blewett was up here. He and his wife pour into our 20-somethings and our seniors. And Jordan Bourne was up here, our son. And we were excited to hear from them. And what struck me and where this sermon kind of was inspired from, I'd been studying a whole different topic for this week. And God just kind of, you know, when he just kind of hits you upside the head. Have you ever had that God smack moment where you're like, oh, this is it? And I'm listening, and they're talking about their stories and their teams and the impact. And it occurred to me that not only is it my responsibility as a mother to pass down a legacy of spiritual, a spiritual direction of life with God, but it is the church's responsibility to do the same thing. And I thought that both of them represented both things and the importance and the priority that we have here at Genesis Metro to always be pouring into the next generation, to always be making sure that we are doing our part, whether we're at home or we're at church, to pour in and set them up for success. So that's why today we're going to talk about legacy leadership as you see that there. And I want to tell you a story about a woman that you probably heard about named Hannah from the Bible. She has a beautiful prayer in chapter 2 that's pretty famous, and a lot of women hang on to that in times when they're really wanting to hear from God. And Hannah is the mother of Samuel. And as we get started, the very first point is basically like when there's a backstory. Have you ever been telling a story to someone and maybe it's just the I personality? I might be telling a story and I think, oh, you missed all these details. So I say, hang on, let me tell you the backstory, because the backstory has all the details you need to really understand the impact of the story. Does anybody do that? I literally do it. I realize I do it all the time. I might be talking really fast in a conversation with you, but I want to make sure you fully understand how cool this is or how important this is. Sometimes eyes can over-deliver on how cool it is, but that's okay. I'm self-aware. I'm all right. I don't need you to laugh. I just want you to be fully informed. But the backstory to me is always where some of the best details are. And so as I started looking through this, I wanted you to make sure that you have a full scope understanding picture of who this family is and what the backstory is. Now, what I want you to know is that Samuel, Hannah's son Samuel that I mentioned, this is the Samuel. This is the Samuel that anointed King Saul, as we heard about in the David series, and then, of course, had the discernment to go and listen to God and find the young King David. Did you guys enjoy the David series that Pastor Tim laid on us the last several weeks? It was better than I thought it was going to be. You know, we sit and we plan these things out with our staff, and we think of, we walk through the scripture. I don't know if you Our process is very intentional. We walk through those passages. We pick out things together. We try to get creative together. And it just went further beyond anything we could plan on paper. And it really became more about Saul, right? And like, oh, this is what not to do. Just watch Saul. Don't do his stuff. But as we learned about that, we see Samuel plays this huge role. And Hannah is his mother. And Samuel is born into this family with this rich legacy and history. Would you go with me to 1 Samuel chapter 1? We're going to start in verses 1 through 3. That's where we're going to start today. And that's what we're going to read. There's a lot of crazy words in here, so just bear with me. There was a certain man from Ramathaim, a Zuphite from the hill country of Ephraim, whose name was Elkanah, son of Jeroham, the son of Elihu, the son of Tohu, the son of Zuph, and Ephraimite. Whoa, let's stop right there. So what I want you to see right here, there's a lot of crazy words, right? I want you to focus on two, the ones that start with E. Elkanah is Hannah's husband, Ephraimite. Now, every description that's given here, every location, every person, every place that you see here, it means something. It's important. So it really gives you a picture of who he is. If we had time, I would love to unpack just verse 1, but we can't right now. But I want you to see it's important to know that Elkanah is an Ephraimite. Why is that important? Because this family is a descendant of Joseph. Joseph, one of the 12 tribes of Israel, right? 2 of his sons made tribes 11 and 12, which is crazy because everybody else just got 1. Well, why do you think that is? Think about who Joseph is. Remember, he's the one that his brothers sold him into slavery. I mean, some of you might dislike your sibling that much. Like, say that one more time, I'm going to sell you off. Anybody? I mean, there might be some of that in my house, right? Sometimes. But they sold him off to slavery. They were sick of him and his favor with dad. So they sold him off. And Joseph, of course, his story is so great. He rises to power in the land. And he has a chance years later, decades later, to either execute or forgive his brothers. Of course, he chooses forgiveness. We know how that story ends. And it's this beautiful wrap-up of how God can work if we choose to forgive. And so Joseph then has 2 sons, Manasseh and Ephraim, and that is where this family comes from, right down that line. So instantly we see this is a family with this is the family. Like the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, you've heard that so many times. That's this family, right? This is them. So this is the family that Hannah has married into. This is the family she's asking God to bring a child into, and this is her stage. So there's this rich family history. Verse 2 and 3, let's read that really quick. Verse 2 and 3. Verse 2, he had 2 wives, Elkanah. Let's stop right there. 2 wives. So I'm not going to lie. When I see those TV shows, sometimes I'm like, you know what? It would be nice to have someone else helping me. Anybody, if I could just clone myself. I'm not somebody, you do the dishes and laundry, the things I don't want to do, I'll do the other things. I'm just saying, no, that is not, that sometimes you think, okay, on one hand, that might be convenient. And then you realize the emotional ramifications of 2 wives in one house. Does anybody know what I mean? Tim has said once, I can't handle 2 wives, I can't even handle the one I got, right? I just need just the one. So this guy has 2 wives. One's Hannah. One is Peninnah. We're going to call her Penny because I think her name is weird and I don't like saying it. Penny had children. Hannah had none. The conflict is set up right before us. Verse 3, year after year, this man and his family went up from their town to worship and sacrifice to the Lord Almighty at Shiloh. So we'll go back to verse 2. So here's Hannah. There's the setup. Penny's got all the children. Hannah has none. There is this family, this successful family. If they are able to travel every year that far to Shiloh, then they have the resources to do so with all of their kids, all Penny's kids, all the servants, all the things that they need to travel. So we know they're successful, godly, devout man. The family pedigree speaks for itself. That family dynamic, though, ooh, that's speaking out, too. See that jump off the page at you? Just jumping out. We all have this somewhere in our family. Anybody got a little drama in your family? Anybody, you have to strategize before you go into family gatherings? Listen, 2 hours in, eat the food, out. Are we on the same page? Don't be trying to stay longer like last time. Anybody do this? You have to have a plan in place to be able to make it through, right? Sometimes we got that. Everybody's got a little bit of this in their family, but this is times 1,000 because you live with it every day. You can't get away from it. All kinds of problems. 1 man, 2 wives. I don't know if that sounds very fun. Second point. These are second and third are kind of closely related, but when there's a backstory, and number 2, when someone is pushing your buttons. Does anybody know what that means? Somebody just irritating you, man. And I kind of thought of it like this, they basically say something, do something, get an instant reaction. Is anyone else a reactor in the room? Anybody? All the calm people that look at us with disdain. You can raise your hand. It's okay. We love you. I understand. There's some kids raising their hand on the moms. Hey, this is Mom's Day. She can react. You let it go. Let it go. Let it go. But when someone pushes your buttons, let's say it's unintentional, personality conflicts, like a coworker. Every time they open their mouth, you're just ready to shove them out the window behind them. I mean, you play these scenes out and you go, oh, God, help me. I'm so mean. Okay, Lord, help me be patient. It's fine. Anybody have personality conflicts with anyone? Somebody at school gets on your nerves, right? You just kick them down the stairs maybe. They can't help it, right? They just drive you crazy. There's that unintentional pushing buttons, maybe mama bear anger. Somebody comes at your kid and you're like, oh, okay, it's on now. I was so real nice 5 minutes ago. Not anymore. Mama bear anger. Has anybody ever seen that come out? Whew. I'm like, get away. I have to leave games sometimes. I'm like, this is injustice. Has anybody ever? Right? And Tim's like, be quiet. Shut up. Go to the car. Leave me alone. Unintentional and intentional. Let's talk about the intentional ones. Does anybody know a personality that just picks and just picks and just picks, and they know it gets to you, and you know that they know, and you know that they're trying to get you to react, and you just tell yourself, it's fine, just don't react, because if I react, they're just going to keep going, but you just can't help yourself? Anybody? I have 3 sons, as you know, 2 of which are teenagers, and the older 2 pick on me relentlessly. One of them staring at me right now like, no, I don't. What? We were on a trip this weekend for our friend graduating. Jessie went with us, Jessie Galata Kilbane. I call her all kinds of things. And she looked at me at one point and said, how do you do this? They don't stop. I'm like, I know. I don't know. I just try to be quiet. But they just pick and pick and pick and pick and pick. Tim, my husband, is a little bit like this. Anybody ever seen Pastor Tim just pick? And he learns something. Ben is making a lot of noises on the front row. Ben is one of Tim's dearest friends. Yes, he just pick, push buttons. It's hard, right? It's hard to be around that. And sometimes when you're trying to laugh and be cool, like, it's fine, it doesn't bother me. And then you know you're over the edge. So somebody pushing your buttons is a hard thing. What about mean girls? Anybody ever experienced this? Guys, give us a moment, okay? The females, it's a female day. Give us a moment to just talk about the mean girls. If you have a daughter in the room, raise your hand. Then you know what mean girls are, right? If any of you, all my teenagers over here are like, I have to deal with mean girls every day. God bless you. God bless you. That's hard stuff. There's nothing worse than having to suffer. I mean, even the guys learn who the mean girls are, right? And you're like, okay, stay away from that shit. All kinds of drama. No. I mean, all of us are like, don't you love when somebody who is a mean girl is like, oh, I just try to stay away from drama? And you're like, you are the drama constantly. The reason people are staying away from you is because it's you. You're the one causing all of it, right? You know those people? So here's a girl, Penny, who is self-aware, who knows exactly what she's doing, and she's a mean girl. I feel like there should be like a medical code for mean girl behavior. Like at school, you'd be like, I have a code red on hall C. I have a code red on hall C. And then all of your like loving, wonderful, awesome friends, it doesn't matter, guys, girls, ever come to your rescue and like pull you away from that danger, right? Don't you wish there's something you could do, like send up a signal? And here we have Penny and Hannah, and the conflict is set. Look at verses, I don't want to skip over, verse 4 and 5. Let's go there. The day came to sacrifice. They're at the temple. I want you to see the dynamics. And then Elkanah would give all the portions of the meat that he needed to wife Penny and all her sons and daughters. But just look at verse 5. He gave a double portion to Hannah because he loved her. Oh, Penny's like, he loves you, but I got the kids. Yep. So do you see this? Do you see this? He gave a double portion to Hannah because he loved her. Can you imagine the turmoil and the dynamic of that? Like the awkwardness that is. Keep going on verse 6 through 8. Because the Lord had closed Hannah's womb, her rival kept provoking her in order to irritate her. Keep going. Verse 7, this went on year after year. Whenever Hannah would go up to the house of the Lord, she would go to the temple, she would do the worship thing. Man, Penny was right there teasing her till she cried, till she wept, till she couldn't eat anymore. And then here comes her husband who needs to go to husband class. Hey, Hannah, why are you crying again? Anybody? Don't ask me that. Husbands, don't ask. Just maybe do a little back rub, non-sexual touch, you know what I'm saying? Okay, a little, hey, how you doing? Not, why are you crying again? Hannah, why are you crying? Why don't you eat? Why are you sad? Don't I mean more to you than 10 sons ever would? I'm like, really, guy? Like, you don't have the finesse down. You understand men. Are you seeing this? Do you see the fallacy? We don't really have time to go into his errors here, but just take note. Maybe not to do that. Here we have a mean girl situation, a mean girl, like code red mean girl situation. All the signals are going up. And you can go back to verse 7, and you can leave it up there. And we have Hannah, who is absolutely distraught at this point. So not only have her buttons been pushed, but now, like, she's like beat down by this. So you got something where when people have pushed your buttons, but when you beat down to the point that you can't see past your emotions anymore, you're just empty, just completely empty. And that's a deeper level. That's a deeper level than we are wanting to go. But if you'll put verse 6 up, I want you to see this. We can't skip over this first phrase of verse 6. Look at that. Because the Lord had closed Hannah's womb. You know, remember it just said she got a double portion every year because, you know, he was sad for her because she didn't have kids and she wanted them. She couldn't get pregnant. She was barren. It was like kind of the label that was on her. But look at verse 6. Because the Lord had closed Hannah's womb, the Lord had closed her womb. For all the women in here that can relate to Hannah, that it's been your lifelong dream to grow up and have kids, be married, and have the house and 2.5 dogs and the gate and all the things. Would you just see here that the Lord is working on your behalf? Because what Hannah doesn't know is what we know. That story is about to unfold, and it's going to be amazing what God is going to do with her son that she's prayed for and he's yet to bring. But all she sees is her pain. All she sees is the very thing that she keeps asking God for, he keeps giving it to someone else. You see that? Over and over and over. Many, many sons and daughters. So how many pregnancies has she lived through trying to be happy for your friend? Maybe not your friend, maybe you. Have friends around you, your family members. Everything you ask God for, seemingly he's giving to someone else. I wonder if there's anybody else in the room, not specifically to having children, but those who've asked God to open something that's been closed or move on your behalf or provide something that seemingly is impossible to be provided. Would you just look at your neighbor and say, God is working? Tell him. God is working. He's always working. So I think that we assume God has forgotten about us. When we've asked him for something and he gives it to someone else, we've assumed that he's forgotten us or he's overlooked it. But look at this. This proves to us that God is in control of her story, right? God is in control of Hannah's story. God has closed the womb, and he's going to open it in his time because God is never late. He is never late. Let's move on. Now she's beat down. She's got one emotional blow after another coming at her. So, you know, there's something about being teased and being involved in a mean girl thing where somebody's pushing your buttons and somebody's irritating you. You know, we all have to learn to work through personality conflicts. It's part of growing up, right? We're emotionally, you know, like a little bit immature when we're teenagers because we don't really know how to handle it. One of the things I've learned walking with them the last year really closely is that it's unfair, the amount of emotions that you go through every day. It really is because you don't really have the skill set yet to manage that. And you learn that as you get older. You don't throw temper tantrums at 30 that you threw at 5, right? That would be socially unacceptable. You learn some emotional prowess along the way. But here we have, this is a little deeper than that. This isn't about just social behavior. This is deep scars, anguish on her soul. The very thing that she's asking God to provide is the very thing that Penny uses. It's the weapon in her hand that delivers blow after blow. And can you imagine her words to her? Imagine what that would have been like. You'll never be good enough. You'll never give him what I can give him. You'll always be a failure. Look at you. You probably just got up this morning and left on the trip. You didn't have to get everybody ready like I did. How easy must life be for you? Can you just imagine the words that came, the vile negativity that poured out of her mouth. In order for Hannah to be in the state that she was in, it was past surface insults. Now we're into like, you're cutting into my heart. You're depositing scars on my heart that I cannot forget. Because when words are said to you, they stay with you for a long time. I mean, there are some things we have to go to therapy for to forget, don't we? Even though we know it was from the enemy, or we know it was from someone who did not have our best interest in mind, someone who was selfish, who was narcissistic, delivering those blows with their words. They stay with us. They're just etched on it. It's like a tape recorder plays it over and over and over. Words that hurt, words that cut. And here is Hannah in this state. And it's not surface anymore. Now you've cut down to her soul. Yet Hannah, always looking to God. I want to pause for a minute in our story, break from the passage, and I want to ask you to go with me in a little like conjecture, maybe some extra biblical, like what if scenarios. What if Hannah hadn't stayed the course, right? Like an alternate reality. Because I don't know if you know that alternate realities are always available. Do you know what I mean? Recently, we saw the movie Avengers Endgame. Anybody see it? So good, so good. Like, I cried like I was at a funeral, like 4 times. I was making noises that were, it was bad. Tim was like, you need to get it together. I'm like, I can't. I'm not going to spoil it for you. I won't say, but it was so good. Some beautiful moments, some very sad moments. But in this movie, the reason I bring it up is there's lots of alternate realities in the movie. There's lots of, like, time travel, and so you see the characters play out in different realities, and it kind of, your mind goes crazy trying to imagine all that took place. But I wonder if any of us have ever known anyone that lives in an alternate reality. Does anybody know anybody like that? It's funny. You can laugh. I know it's uncomfortable because you really don't want them to live in an alternate reality. But, like, have you ever met someone who, like, revises history as they retell stories? Like, yeah, that didn't happen. Nope. My family members, I don't know, maybe things like that. But, there's always that possibility for all of us. We all have that in us, Because that can also be, it can be a sign that we're not in touch with maybe what actually happened. Maybe we're not teachable because we don't really want to admit that we had a part in that. Sometimes alternate realities are born from that. And I wonder if anybody has ever had so much hurt that you had to rewrite the story and believe the story that you tell yourself now in order to get through it. Does anybody know what I mean? Like, sometimes we just believe the story we told ourselves about what happened, but it's not actually what happened. So I wonder if we go with a what-if scenario with Hannah, if we might have a little bit more insight maybe to what we do to color things a little bit when we're in the middle of hurt and difficult seasons. So how we handle hurt really does define our reality, right? How we handle it. Because, things are going to happen all the time. Things are going to happen in your life that aren't fair. Things are going to happen that don't seem just. Things are going to happen that you worked hard for and somebody else got the promotion. They got the favor for it. But it's what you do with it. It's what you do with it that matters. So I'm going to tell you 3 things about handling hurt. 3 things that I wonder if we ask what if on Hannah, would it mean something? We need perseverance to push through. We need perseverance to push through. What if Hannah had no perseverance? I mean, we hear this. You start, definitely in school sports and all kinds of places. Perseverance, like you got an attitude, affects leadership, all kinds of stuff about perseverance, right? All these things we need. We have all these little quips, all these little one-liners. But I wonder if we really don't. What happens when we don't have any? What happens if Hannah decided she could not do it anymore? I think in this day and age that we live in, everyone is encouraged to push yourself harder, right? Don't you hear that all the time? Whether you're in work, it's a corporate world, you push to the next promotion, you push for that presentation, you push to get the client. If you're in school and you're in sports, you're pushing to get the starting position, the starting place. You're pushing for more. You're pushing for academic scholarships. You're pushing. That doesn't stop when you graduate high school, right? We just keep doing it as adults. And as mothers, for sure we do that. We push and we push and we push to give our kids everything that they're wanting, that they're needing, that they're going to ask for. We want to provide for them. We push and push and push. And I wonder if we put that same tenacity to a spiritual level, if we might have different results with the hand of God on our lives. We need perseverance to push through. What if Hannah had none? Second thing I want you to see is we can't let emotions do all the driving. We can't let emotions do all the driving, right? What if Hannah gave in to all the anger she had against God? What if she's like, God, I keep asking for this. I just need one. I'm just asking you for one. I don't need to have 20 like Penny. I'm asking you for one. Just one baby. You give babies out every year. Just one. Why? Why are you leaving me out of the blessing? What if she was too jealous? You watch somebody else get all the blessings, and eventually that starts to get in your head, right? They don't get it. They keep getting all the things, and they're not working for them. They'll never understand how I feel. And that jealousy, when left alone to our own thoughts, it can lead us to dark places. Have you noticed? When you don't let God speak in, you don't let others speak in, when you don't invite accountability in, that darkness can start to take over where it turns into bitterness. There's a great verse in Hebrews that talks about being sure you're working those things out constantly, because that bitter root can just get down in there and plant itself where it just grows and grows and takes over. And you're just a bitter person spewing out negativity because that's what's inside. What if Hannah let her emotions do all the driving? And number 3 is we can't let past results affect our present effort. We can't let past results affect our present effort. So what if she let all the years, year after year after year, all those answers of Hannah, wait, because it wasn't no. You notice that? It was just wait, Hannah, wait. What if she let all of that affect how much she pursued God? What if all the words that had been thrown at us, all the hurt that had been slung across the room and landed on our hearts and left a big open scar inside, what if that was the breaking point when she said, that's it, I'm done? She would never have gotten to see all that Samuel would accomplish, all that Samuel would set up, all that he would do for God, that he had this great big calling on his life, and it was coming in the decades, to come. It was coming, but she didn't know that. All she knew was the pain and the place that she was in at that moment. So at some point, there has to be an anchor of belief and hope inside of us that chooses to believe and see it, even though everything around us says no. There has to be a spiritual component that drives us, that leads us, or else we would quit before our story is written. Oh, that we would be a church, a people, a life group, a small group, seniors, juniors, sophomores, all of you, that don't quit before our story is done being written. Because in this present time, it might feel like this is going to define you forever. But I promise you it's not. Because verse 6a tells us God is always working in the midst of our pain. Can we give God some praise for a minute? Last weekend at Uprising, one of the big things we do as a church at all of our conferences across Carrie, and I heard Tim saying that the guys kept hearing him yell out over and over, I know you're tired. You got plenty of time. Don't give up. And I thought that really does kind of like encapsulate the spirit of Hannah. That God was just saying, Hannah, hey, don't give up. You got plenty of time. I know you're tired. I'm right here with you. I'm right here with you. So the next point I want you to hear is this. And this is where this story takes off for me. I haven't been able to get through it yet without getting choked up. When you need to get up one more time, Hannah, when you need to get up one more time. 1 Samuel 1:9, the beginning of 9. Look at this. Once she'd finished eating, finished dinner, she stands up. Leave it right there. Now remember where we're at. They've traveled. I don't know how many years they've done this. Year after year is what it tells us. I'm going to guess at least a decade. Year after year after year after year, they've traveled. And so, back in that day, they had to travel to the temple to meet with God, right? He wasn't just everywhere. When Jesus came on, he changed everything. But in the Old Testament setting, you have to go there. You have to offer your sacrifices and your worship, and you worship there in the temple, and you say your prayers, and you basically just like commit again to God for that year. And so Hannah had gotten to the place where she couldn't eat. You remember that in the verses before? She's so emotionally spent, she can't even eat. Has anybody been there? You don't have to raise your hand. Has anybody ever been there where you are so drained from the hurt around you, you can't even eat? It makes you sick to think about eating. When my dad died 10 years ago, it was really sudden. And I remember after about, I don't even know, 2 or 3 days after being there with my mom, because we all rushed to her side. He died of a heart attack. It was sudden. We had to drive the 7 hours to get there. I remember after a couple days realizing I hadn't eaten anything. I wasn't even thinking. Did anybody know what I mean? You're just, the grief takes you over, and you don't even, it's not even a response anymore. Your stomach doesn't growl. You don't think about food. You're just overtaken with grief. And this is where we find Hannah. But it says she was eating dinner. So that tells me there's a little hope in the house with Hannah. She's eating again. That's good. And then she stands up. What I want you to see is the next time we see her in verse 10, don't put it up yet, she's bowing down with her face to the ground. So she stands up because she's getting ready to bow down. Do you see that? She stands up to walk to the place where she's going to meet with God and ask him one more time if he will provide a child for her. She believes enough to ask one more time if he will show up in her pain. Put verse 10 up. In her deep anguish, Hannah prays to the Lord, weeping bitterly. Look at that picture those words paint. Verse 11, she makes a vow, and here's where everything changes. She makes a vow. She says, Lord Almighty, if you only look at me, your servant's misery, please remember me. Don't forget me. Give me a son. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to give him back to you all the days of his life. And she puts a caveat at the end. And no razor will ever be used on his head. Tuck that away. We're going to go back to that in a moment. But here's Hannah, same place every single year, same worship, same priest, same speaker. And she believes one more time, maybe she can hear from God. Maybe he will answer the cries of her heart and not give the very blessing she's asking for to someone else. Does it matter when we come in here every single week and wonder if we expect to hear from God or not? Does that have anything to do with us hearing from God? I think it does. I think if we come in expecting to meet with God and expecting to hear him, we might just hear him say, wait, just wait. Or we might hear him say, stand up. Stand up and turn your heart to me because I'm about to blow your mind. We might just hear him say that. But in the waiting, what we see is that's when God teaches us who he is. Has anybody ever learned that in your life? The waiting has as much to do with the breakthrough as the moment of breakthrough, does it not? Because when you have to wait for God to deliver you, you appreciate that deliverance so much more than if he had just granted you your wish right away. If you want new shoes and you have to save up for them, you appreciate the shoes more if you had to save for a year. But if somebody just buys you everything you want, you don't appreciate it. If God just grants everything we want like a genie in a bottle, what kind of God is he? God has good things for us, but it is up to us and our hearts and the position that we find ourselves in. James 5:16 is a great verse that says the prayer of a righteous person is powerful and effective in the kingdom of God. And what that means is maybe it is the same setting every single time, but that doesn't restrict the results. The same setting doesn't define what God can do. It's all about the heart. It's all about Hannah having the heart to stand up one more time in order to bow down to the God who could bring everything she ever wanted. Can we give God some praise on that? So good. Pray one more time. Push one more time. Persevere one more time is what he says to her. And God may just open that which has been closed in your life. He may just do it. And what I want you to see is this, that this legacy leadership lives on. So Hannah, it's interesting to use the word leadership. She's not on a stage with a microphone. She's the underdog, right? She's the underdog in the story. And yet here she is leading her family in this quiet, prayerful, focused, hope-filled way. Because when she stood up in spirit-led determination to see God move for her. And she stood up and she believed that God could do it. She knew that he could. She wondered if he would. But she stood up and she asked one more time. And look at verse 19 and 20. Early the next morning, they arose and worshiped before the Lord. And they went back home. And look at 20. So in the course of time, Hannah became pregnant and gave birth to a son. And she named him Samuel. Go back to 19. Look at her posture before the Lord. So she's in this place where she's given it all. She didn't have anything left. But what she did have left, she stood up. She went to the place to meet with God. And then she poured out every last ounce of herself. In deep anguish, she wept bitterly. She wept so much, we don't have time to cover it, but other people in the place kind of noticed how kind of out of control she was. Like, she wept openly. She couldn't even hide it anymore. And she gets up from that the next morning, and she worships with her family, even the ones who are mean, even the ones who have delivered all the hurt, and she goes back home to do what she knows to do. I know I have to do the next thing. I'm going to go do that. And then God answers her prayer because this time it's different. And what we know, what we see is that Hannah's posture before God has influenced us sitting in this room today, because what we see is that Samuel does become this great man of God because she made a vow before God. He will be dedicated to you all the days of his life, even so much like the next level of like not a razor will touch his head. What that means is she's going to even make sure that he fulfills the Nazirite vow, which is this next level spiritual component in someone's life where they vow that basically all their eyes are on Jesus. They will not cut their hair. They will not touch anything dead. They will not eat meat. There's all these rules we can't go into, but it's like a next level. She didn't just say, God, please give me a son and I will dedicate him to you. I'll go to church. I'll let the elders pray over him. It'll be, come on, let's do it. I'm going to make a deal with you. She makes a vow before God, which is a strong word, a strong connotation, something that cannot be broken. And she says, not only will he be dedicated to every day of his life in service to you, but he will fulfill the Nazirite vow all the days of his life. That's like next level. And what we now know is that Samuel does just that. He fulfills that Nazirite pledge and he moves into the temple, moves away from home into the temple at 3 years old. And then at 11 years old, he hears God's voice for the first time. At 11 years old, for any kids in the room, don't think you're too young to hear from God. You are not too young to hear from God. He will speak and you can hear if your heart is in the right place. Especially mom, hear this. Are you praying over your kids? Are you praying over your kids to hear from God? That is the faithfulness of this mother. What we see is the fruit lives out. Here is Samuel at 11 years old. He begins to take the role of a prophet at 11. Because a prophet, the definition is you hear from God and you proclaim that word to others, and it is right on. It's not cuckoo crazy pants kind of prophet. It's like right on. God is speaking and he is listening. And then what does Samuel do? He ordains the first king of Israel, just like the people want, on God's orders, Saul. Then he notices there's evil in Saul and God confirms it. And he says, go find David. David is a shepherd. He's a no-name. We're going to make him into some. Go get him. We're going to ordain him. And then of course he establishes King David and walks through that entire decade with David when he's running from Saul. And then David, of course, his lineage gives birth to Jesus Christ, who's the Savior of the world, who makes a way for you and me to overcome the worst of ourselves and find our way to hope again. He is the reason we sit in this room today. Jesus Christ, who came to save yesterday, today, and forever. He is the Samuel, Hannah. They have everything to do with Jesus. Everything to do with what Jesus wants to do for you and for me, for our church, for the 107 and the community beyond that. Let's give God some praise and thank him for that today. Would you bow your heads? You can stand as the band begins to come out. God, we thank you for all that you teach us in your word. I wanted to get through 3 chapters. I got through 10 verses. Lord, I thank you that if we are looking, we can see you in the smallest phrases of your word. We can see you with the smallest nuances of the way you move in worship and the way you might speak into us. God, I thank you that we don't have to live a life where we sit in the hurt that's around us, but we as believers, in the hope that you've brought, we get to live a life full of hope no matter what is thrown at us, God. I pray today that you would help us to see, not to stop before our story is done being written, but that you're always working. God, we love you. We praise you today. Let's worship him in Jesus' name.